Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Brothers of the Arcana. As always, I am your host, Alex Aldea.
I am your co-host, Dave Ferrigno.
And with us today, we have Michael Elston.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. So Mike's a great buddy. He's also a Mason, part of our fraternity, and does a lot of really cool stuff and has an amazing background. And we're doing a series on military folks and their ideas and their thoughts on, or past military folks and their ideas and thoughts on the esoteric. So we figured, what better person can we have than our buddy Mike? So as you couldn't recall, we had Nick on, and he talked about war and all kinds of wonderful things. And having Air Force guys on the 50 cal on top of the wall, and all kinds of other very interesting stuff like that. So I'm sure we'll have a fascinating conversation with Mike. And yeah, tell us a little bit about your beginning. In other words, I know you went to boot camp in the Marines, and that was a formative thing for you. So how did that go?
Actually, it starts before that. I was born and raised in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't come from the best family background, so I wanted to get out of New Jersey to kind of see what else was out there. So I didn't finish high school. And when I didn't finish high school, I went down to the Marine recruiter, and the Marine recruiter said he couldn't take me. They were only allowed to have one non-high school grad a year, and they already filled their slot.
Okay.
So I was a little deflated, to say the least, but I kept thinking about how I wanted to get out of the state. So I walked down the hall, and I joined the United States Army first.
Okay.
So in joining the Army, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where I went to my basic training, and I became a combat engineer and learned how to build bridges and then blow them up. Okay. Basically, small, medium, large explosive training. Did my basic. But while I was there, the Army said one of the catches is when you're in your school, after you're done with boot camp, at night, and on the weekends, instead of getting Liberty or whatever they had going on, I had to go to school to get my GED. So in doing that, I did it. I got my GED. So they also didn't trick me, but they misled me in believing that it's not a problem. We're going to have you join. You're going to join as a reservist. And as soon as you get back to your unit, you can just turn around. You can transfer into active Army.
Yeah, right.
Because I didn't want to hear the whole, I didn't want to go in and then come back home. So I did. I went in, came back home, went to my command, and the reserves were just like, I didn't want nothing to do with it.
Now, why is that?
There were guys painting trucks, long hair, no discipline. I couldn't tell you the last time these guys did a PFT.
What's a PFT?
Physical fitness test.
Oh.
Just really civilians walking around in camis, or, and back then the reserves were really, really lax. And we'll even touch on that later on about how actually in my time in the military, the reserves changed a lot. So I was actually in a town called Kinnelon, New Jersey, and I was in a mall, like a little shopping center up on a hill, off of Route 23.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing some shopping with some friends, and I had all my Army sweats on, and I was proud, and I said, I'm just going to get out of here as soon as I can. And all of a sudden behind me, I hear a guy start swearing at me.
Oh, geez. Why?
I turn around. It was the gunnery sergeant, Hines, who was the Marine recruiter. And he couldn't believe, he goes, what did you do to yourself? He was like, this is the worst thing you could have ever done. And I said, you wouldn't help me out. And so we started talking, and he said, if you would have just had a GED or a high school diploma, I would have been able to help you out. I said, I have a GED now. We left the mall together. I left my friends, drove back to the recruiting office about 8 o'clock at night after stopping off my house to get a copy of the GED.
Mm-hmm.
And then literally 2 weeks later, I was going, 2 to 3 weeks later, I went through the gates to go back to boot camp for the Marines.
No, I didn't even know that you could do that. I mean, once you start with an armed forces where you could switch over like that.
Yep. Inter-service transfer, it's called.
Interesting.
And, lack of better words, after we were done filling out all the final paperwork, he says, you got to come with me. So we walk down the hall, and he stands in front of the Army recruiting thing. And it's like, he's with me. Look at what I did, you know. And he's just start going off on these guys, you know, and saying the most god awful things I'd ever heard in my life.
That's a Marine thing to do.
Absolutely.
Jeremy guy's like, all right, you win some, you lose some, I guess.
So I did 2 boot camps in 1 year. Turned right around.
2 boot camps in 1 year.
Yes.
It was probably easier to do the Marine one since you already had the Army one.
I think it helped. It helped, but it was you really couldn't compare the two. Army, I think if you get out of boot camp, and then you do take the infantry route, once they get out of infantry training school, if they go to Ranger or they do something like that, that's when the skills are really taught. That's when it really, I think, gets tough. I mean, the grunts are tough. As far as I'm concerned, the grunts, regardless of where you're at, they're tough.
Mm-hmm.
But the special operations thing just takes a little bit more. So again, because I chose not to finish high school, I started this process because I'm not a goal-orientated person. I'm a process-orientated person.
Explain that.
Goal-orientated, goals end. All right. I just think if you have something that works for you or something that you want to work for you, or culture or lifestyle, it's got to be a process. There's really no end. You're just going to keep going with it.
Okay.
So obviously learning the hard way, that was my process at that time. And I try, and you'll find out over time that I just kept that ethos through my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through Marine boot camp, did well, went through infantry training school. During infantry training school, different units will come, specialized units will come, and they'll ask you if you want to join, like the prestigious silent drill platoon from 8th and I in Washington, D.C.
Is that the 2 million unknown soldier?
No, 2 million unknown soldier. That's the old guard of the Army. I'm talking about the ones in the dress blues that they don't do any commands. The silent drill platoon.
Oh, okay.
They travel all over the world doing their routine. You know, they asked me if I wanted to join that. Are you willing to drill 8 hours a day, 6 days a week? I'm like, no. So
I don't blame
but then the helicopters came in and guys are going up and down the ropes. They're fast roping, they're spy rigging, all this stuff, all the high speed stuff. And they're like, you know, you got a good swim qual, you got a good PFT, you're ready to give 150%, you know, and go reconnaissance. And it was, I was like, well, what do you think about like 90%? They're like, the hell out of here, right?
I feel about 56%.
Yeah, exactly.
If I give it to you today. Yeah.
So I didn't jump on board with, so they sent me to the grunts. I stayed in the grunts for a little while. And now again, from making a wrong decision, I said, no, I don't want to be in the grunts. So I was with 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines, and I didn't want to stay there. So I ended up transferring, trying out for, and passing to go on to Stapleton. Stapleton is Surveillance Target Acquisition Platoon. I was Sniper Platoon.
Oh.
So I spent some time in Sniper Platoon, and then after I got there, got acclimated, I said, you know, after training with them and seeing them, I said, Recon's the way to go. So Recon, again, it's this long suffering of period of your life. You got to go for 3 weeks just to see if you have what it takes. So they just punish you and thrash you. It's a real savage thing for just 3 weeks. Then they have a process called assessment selection. That's where they really start squeezing the guys to see if you mentally and physically have what it takes.
Is that when they come up to you, they're like, you know, you can quit at any time?
Yes.
Just ring that bell.
All the time.
It could be all done for you.
Yeah, every day. Every day. Every day. And, you know, and they start doing that to you after 12, 14 hours of training. And being an amphibious reconnaissance Marine, we spend so much time in the water. So, and water's a great equalizer. Everybody gets tired in the water, you know, especially when your gear's wet. So you're cold, wet, and tired for the entire time.
Did you do those log drills like the SEALs do and all?
Yep. Yes.
That's got to be miserable too.
It is, especially with the sand. Sand always makes it a lot of fun. Injuries are like the big thing with that. Putting them down, picking them up, and then guys get tired and they fall. And when they fall, the Lord falls on them. So, you know, picking up the boats. We used to have to carry the boats. The rigid rating crafts. You ever saw them? The Zodiacs. You hear them over your head.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Are those things heavy?
Yeah, they're real heavy.
Well, especially when you're training probably for the 15th hour of the day. I'm sure anything feels heavy at that point.
You know, and then you got the instructor doing pull-ups on the back on the gunnel on the back, you know, while you're trying to carry it and move.
That's not helpful. That's
Yes,
not helpful.
It is not helpful. So then you, like I said, after you're done with assessment selection, then you get to actually try out. So then you go, they call it BRC now, Basic Reconnaissance Course, but when I was in, it was ARS, Amphibious Reconnaissance School. I went there. After you're done being there, I think it's 10 weeks, it was 12 weeks. Then you turn around and I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I served and was attached to the 24th MU, the 22nd MU, and the 26th MU on different deployments.
So what does MU stand for?
Marine Expeditionary Unit.
Let me ask you this. What's the difference between a regular Marine, a recon, and a force recon? What would be the...
Well, regular Marines are Marines. I mean, there is no regular Marine.
Right.
They're all exceptional, right? But it's the mission. It's the mission set. If you have a target and you're just going to go in there and you're just going to decimate everything, you'll send a battalion or a company of Marines in there, and grunts will get that done like you wouldn't believe. Reconnaissance, in its essence, is really what we did is gather information. You go out, you recon the area. We would tell them where they could land on the beach, or we would parachute in and tell them certain LZs that they could set up, how big the units were, what kind of patrol patterns they had. So in essence, we were always forward of the FEMA, the forward edge of the battle area.
Gotcha. Interesting. So then is force recon and recon the same thing?
No, you got different. First off, there is no more force recon.
Oh, okay.
There's, I believe in the 3rd Marine Division, they still have a detachment. When I was in 2nd Recon Battalion, that's a whole battalion of recon guys attached to 2nd Marine Division. When I was in 2nd Force Recon Company, that's only a company of Marines for the whole battalion, because you're very specialized and you have 2 different teams. Most of the time, they would call them green teams and black teams. Green teams were long distance or deep reconnaissance teams. And black teams were CQB or more of direct action.
I always thought that the force recon guys were the ones that they dropped in way behind enemy lines.
Deep reconnaissance.
The deep reconnaissance. Yeah, okay.
Deep reconnaissance, when you absolutely got to get out there and see what's going on, even further past than the battle. Than the immediate battle area.
That's something, man. Dave, any thoughts?
Many.
Well, have at it.
So when you're obviously in that capacity, do you have, what were those, like teams of 2 to 4 people that you were out there in the field with?
So you're always
yourself?
No, it's always mission orientated. You're never by yourself. So anything you see in a movie about guys being by themselves, your shit is weak, and you are in a bad place if you're by yourself. Okay?
Understood.
You either went through something bad and you're just trying to survive. So it's never like that. Even modern day, and even sniper teams back when I was in, those teams of 3 guys. You know, and even more in an urban area, because while you're laying down and you're scanning the area, doing overwatch, taking targets of opportunity, you need guys around you to protect you. Because while you're laying there and you're really focused, someone could sneak right up behind you.
Sure.
And your spotter might be a couple hundred yards away or on another rooftop trying to get another vantage point. So that'd be the less. Most of the time, reconnaissance would be full platoons, anywhere between 9 and 14 guys. In force, we worked in teams of 11.
Good. Loved it. Now, I understand the Army a little better than I understand the gradients of the Marine Corps. So they have, obviously, the Special Forces of the Army. You have the Rangers, which are technically, I guess, Special Forces.
They sit at the SOCOM table now.
Do they now?
Yeah.
Okay.
See, and that's when I was in, there was no representation at the SOCOM table for the Marine Corps. Even Force Reconnaissance, we were temp loaned to the MAGTF teams or to the special operations teams. We were temp loaned. Like we'd say, oh, we have a certain mission, so we need certain couple of guys that have these skill sets, and we'd be attached to work with special forces or work with Rangers or work with Delta. In the Army, it's you have regular infantry, And the word Rangers is a very broad stroke. It seems used to be that no one could even say the word unless you were a Ranger. But now there's people, they're attached to a Ranger battalion, so they're allowed to wear the patch. Then you have guys that actually went through the Ranger course.
Ranger qualified, which is what Nick was. He was very clear on that. He said, look, I don't want people, I'm not going to claim that I was a Ranger. I was Ranger qualified. We did that. He was a captain. Did very well. But yeah, he was very honest about it.
Yeah, and then most of the guys that get Ranger qualified, they'll become part of a battalion. And I think right now, the 75th Ranger Battalion, I think they have a representative at the SOCOM table. And see now, like I said, there is no more Force Recon. It's called MARSOC. They took they took the old Second Force Reconnaissance Company, I believe somebody said in 98, 99. No, I think it was maybe a little before that. And they said, there's no more force. We're going to turn around. We're going to come up with MARSOC. MARSOC is Marine Special Operations Capable.
Right.
And now MARSOC is, I think, a tier 3 team capability, which is equal to Special Forces in some ways, but they don't do any advising. But pretty much they have a broad scale. They do all kinds of missions, and they were highly successful in Afghanistan and Iraq.
So you said you were more process-oriented than goal-oriented. Did that conflict in any way when you were deployed and doing these recon missions? Because I would imagine when you're on a mission, you obviously have a goal versus a process. And, if you're going through this process.
Right. Well, you want to, job 1 in the military is complete the mission. Job 2 is troop welfare. So you're going to take care of the mission first. And that's the only conflict I ever had. Basically, being goal orientated, my goals were to make sure all of my stuff was wired tight so my shit didn't get weak when I went in the field. All right. And
what that weak shit.
Exactly. And
the strong Imodium shit.
That's it.
Absolutely.
And there's the terminology. I still try and get rid of it these days. I still speak sometimes like I'm there.
That's all right. You didn't curse in the first 10 minutes, we're gonna be fine.
Yeah, we're fine.
But what happens is when you start talking about mission oriented, goal and process, my process was to complete the mission, do it the way the Marine Corps wanted it. Unfortunately, take my soul, put it in a jar, set it on a shelf. And the process was to come home, complete the mission, do a good job, and make it back home, and make sure all my men made it back home. So that was the process. That's more like...
You just alluded to something that, it's a tough question, obviously, and it's a tough thing. But, I'm not going to ask the dumb question to everybody else, which doesn't shoot anybody. But like the idea is, if things like that happen, and of course they happen in the field of battle all the time, that's what war is. How does that affect the human being when you're called to do something like that? I mean, do you feel on some level, or do you know from others how they felt about it, before and after, and what do you walk away from?
I think it's a human process. Just every human being, it's a process. And I think the more we talk about it, the better it is.
Sure.
And
you don't want to keep it in, obviously.
No, yeah. You want to try and talk about it within reason.
Sure.
Some people you can't talk to about it because they're that kind of person. But let me see. How do I say it? I guess because if you didn't care, I don't think you'd be a normal human.
Sure.
Okay. If it didn't bother you, like guys, I'll be very honest with you.
Some guys I had a great time. All right.
Well,
can't wait to get back.
I'll just honest, like not soul searching, but just honest things. After my first, I'd say it was on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd say it was around 5 or 6 combat action. Okay, I saw combat action. I was young. I wasn't even 20 years old. When I came back, I didn't realize the way the human body, the human psyche, emotionally would hit you. So for a little while, I was like, I didn't understand. So when I heard people having a hard time with it, I kind of got on the Marine Corps side and I was like, what are you, a baby? Like, what's wrong with you? But it starts wearing you down. And think about it like a sponge. This is what I was taught. If you think about it like a sponge, and you're one of those big construction sponges, and you suck in all this water, and you just keep taking it in. But sooner or later, it starts coming back out. And that's what happens. So like when I first got out, I was diagnosed, and this is what I mean by it's a human process, because this way people are still learning about it. When I first got out, military would basically say, you know, you had combat fatigue. That was it. That was, combat fatigue. Yeah, it was combat fatigue. But it's okay. You're going to get over it. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Then a couple of years later, then there was battle stress.
Mm-hmm.
You might not get over it right away, but you're going to be okay. And then they turned around and they said, it's post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's something you're going to have for the rest of your life.
Wow.
Oh,
They overshoot it on both sides, don't they? They're
Yes.
like, you'll be fine tomorrow. Just rub some dirt on it. Oh, this is with you forever. You're done.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
But remember, the people at the forefront was the VA, you know, the Veterans Administration. So, you know, they overshoot on just about everything. So, but it's a personal learning. It's a personal journey. Again, the process, you don't want to have a goal. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey.
sure.
Because you don't want to think about the end of it. So, you just look at it from a human. But getting back to the actual battlefield, I will tell you this. I think, because everybody has their own thoughts on it. When you train every day and you suffer with the men you love, and you train to do a job that clearly not everybody wants to do.
Uh-huh.
And then you meet an enemy that has a uniform on and he's trained, there is, regardless of how much you think you hate them, there is an underlying area of respect, soldier to soldier.
Mhm.
It's the different element of non-uniformed, using women and children as shields, or employing children and women, or employing horrible tactics. That's what lays on your mind. That's what tears you up. And like as my wife would know, I have good days, I have bad days. But at night, when you're all alone, that's when they come back. That's when they come back to talk to you.
Ooh, man. And Nick said something pretty similar, and I know from his experiences, some of the battles that he goes through with stuff like that, which I won't relate publicly, obviously. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'll make a small parenthesis, and then I know Dave's got more stuff to ask, but my buddy Joe Riggio worked with another guy named Roy Frazier, who was tasked by the Israeli military to do a big study. They spent a lot of money on this to understand why some people come back from war and they have PTSD and they're all messed up. And some people come back from war, and there are those people, they just turn the page and they just move on with their lives. Like, how does it happen to some but not to others? When they found that there was some level of what's called the generative imprint.
Mhm.
In other words, a homeostasis for how we are kind of from when we're born forward, before we get loaded up with all the world's nonsense. But if you could swing back to that, then you've basically just kind of circumvented all the stuff. You don't necessarily need to work it out. You just don't go there, right? So then, some people can do that naturally.
Coping mechanisms. And some guys are good at it and some guys aren't.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's almost like, what do they call it? Rebooting your hard drive?
In essence.
Yes. And don't click on any of the icons on this side. And you just stay on this side. In other words, like, I'll be honest with you, certain times of the year, like, you stay busy. You stay busy. And then, but you have to watch, because the people that can turn the page, a lot of my buddies that came out, they're fine. They could turn the page.
Yeah.
And what happens is a lot of them end up having some sort of social depression, that they have survivor guilt. Then they get mad at themselves that they so easily could forget about something so important as their friend dying. They get mad at themselves. So then it starts a whole other cycle. But, you know what it is? Work hard, work on yourself. And unfortunately, it's hard work. The sin is never failing, because it's going to happen. The sin is quitting. So you just don't quit.
So, yeah, and I want to ask you about that never failing thing. So, in a little bit, once we start talking about the fraternity, but Do you have any points before I move on to?
No, go ahead.
To that point, I think, my uncle was a Marine in Vietnam, and he never, to this day, he still doesn't want to talk about things because, he still relives like his best friend dying in combat and everything. And I think, to your point, that the human element that's there. But one thing that you said earlier, you said putting your soul on a shelf when you're going out for these missions. I don't think anybody that hasn't served, especially in a combat situation, probably could never understand or fathom what that's even like. And from that perspective, we understand you're going through training, you're going through this process, but how was it that all these brave men and women are able to just put their soul on the shelf and go out there? And I understand you're doing your job and that's what you're assigned to do, but just from a human perspective, to just sit there and say, yeah, we're doing it.
Service before self and service to each other. I'm a huge patriot. I love my family and I love my country and I love my God.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's time, it's the guys. It's all about the guys. And you're doing a mission and you do it. And when I say put your soul on a shelf, I don't really think that if I'm over here and a couple 100 yards away over there is another uniformed soldier and you're shooting at each other, I think that's more of a survival. Okay, my training against his training. Like I said, there's almost like an underlaying layer of respect. Like he's another soldier. He believes in what he believes in. I believe what I believe in, and we're gonna go. And we're going to see what happens when the dust clears.
Mm-hmm.
When you put your soul on a shelf is when the extras, the collateral damage, the people, cultures that fight differently than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell my sons the same thing. It's real world versus American world. And I that's the biggest thing. Like even driving here.
Mm-hmm.
House called me. I'm going to get you coffee. How do you like your coffee? I said, milk, sure. He says a little milk or a lot of milk. And I'm like, it doesn't really matter. I'm like happy I'm getting a coffee. In places I've been, like we have a thing at Thanksgiving. We all sit down. We say we're thankful for it. I'm thankful that I go to the bathroom inside. I live in a house that's heated. We have tons of food. Sure. And I'm with my family and I work in plumbing. Like it's real, and no one's shooting at me. It's really basic for me. I just break it down onto that level, And
that's beautiful, man. Yeah, that is really amazing to hear that love both.
It really changes perspective.
Yeah,
you see, like I look at my sons and I look at my daughters, and I see the way I raised them and what they had and how fortunate we are. Then I remember when we were liberating Kuwait. And all the children are left behind. That's one thing that never is on the news. You see the bombings, you see what Saddam Hussein, you see what happened, the burning oil. Also, thousands of kids trying to kill each other for the scraps, for MREs that we were throwing. Living off garbage heaps. Trying to. We would see like little 10-year-old kids carrying little 2-year-old kids, to try and go and find water or something. And it's crazy because the parents are either gone or dead or abandoned. And that's what I'm saying. You keep everything in perspective. So you put your soul on the shelf, but then when you come back, you take your soul out, you stand back up, and you just keep working because I fail all the time. So what you do is you just keep working on yourself. That's the only way I can explain it. You keep going.
Mm-hmm. Love that, man. That's awesome. So you found Masonry.
Yes.
Well, before we get that, let's talk about a little bit briefly your political career. So you are involved in local government. That's
Correct.
Something that's important to you.
Yes.
Why did you feel like you wanted to come back and be a part of that?
Actually, I waited later in life. I've been out of the military for a while. I did it again, working harder. Remember I said that process?
Sure.
So I go in the military, I come out, then I go to college. Then I start a different trade. But I got into politics. I'm a local elected county committee representative at a the 39th Legislative District, which is the 9th Congressional District of New Jersey, which is basically part of North Jersey.
It's a mouthful.
Yes, yeah. So what happens is we hear from our constituents. I'm elected, so I do. I listen. We have town hall meetings. We do that, and then I go down and it's the beginning process of who your constituents want you to go to the county level and vote for. So, it could be presidential, it can be the governor, it could be Senate, Congress, all the way down. And then this way it trickles up. So if all the county committee representatives from my district all say they want candidate A, then basically they're going to vote on it, then candidate A. And that's how the electors work in either the electoral college and also how it works when they count, because you have the president is the only person that's elected by everybody in the entire country. So when you turn around, you talk about
In a sense. Right.
all right, because you have electors and you have county committee. So we can turn around and we listen to who our constituents want to vote for. But when you start talking about a governor's race, the Senate, the Congress, that's vote. That's one vote, one person.
Right.
That's done. 51% is a winner. That's it. So we go down and we take care of that stuff. I'm more behind the scenes with that. I listen to my constituents. I'm also the president of the Oakland Republican Club. Which we get together. We have weekly meetings. We run it. We hear from what people would want to change. And I wanted to get involved with it because I just really thought I was kind of upset that, I moved to the town, got to know my neighbors. All my neighbors knew who the third baseman was, the Yankees. Not one of them knew who their local representatives were for the state. They had no concept of how much they're, and I
A
always,
lot of Yankee fans in your neighborhood.
yes. And what else it comes down to is I always try and not pull one side or the other. What I like to do is I always go everything as far as like a fiscal money. Money is important to everybody. And I can reach out to anybody with money. And when people turn around and say, well, I don't get involved with the school board. Oh, you don't get involved with the school board? 72 cents on every dollar of your property taxes goes to the school board.
How about that?
Yeah. So then now all of a sudden they want to know. Same thing as people say, well, why don't you like this or why don't you like that? I try and break it down to, I don't really care if someone wants to do something. I may ethically disagree with it, but I don't think my tax dollars should have to pay for everything. And that's how I reach most of my constituents on both sides of the aisle.
Sure.
I like that as an idea. And people, understand this, for God's sake. America is not a democracy. It is a representative republic. And that's very important because people think that it's just this plurality and everybody just has an immediate pull to the note. That's not how it works. It's representative. That's what the Constitution is. So I think it's important that that's the case.
Constitutional republic that uses a democratic process to elect our
Right.
Plus, democratic process, but not a strictly speaking democracy. It's not a grassroots, bottom up everything.
No, and I try and explain that to people. There's no place in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or any of the Articles of Confederation or any of the other earlier governing documents that we had. There has never been the word democracy. Democracy is mob rules.
It is mob rules. What's interesting, and I spoke about it with my constitutional law professor in college or in law school, was what if instead of, because we went from Declaration of Independence is liberty and the pursuit of happiness, right? And in the Constitution, it's liberty and property rights. But what if they had replaced property rights with pursuit of happiness, and that was a fundamental inalienable right? That would be a very interesting thing, considering that we started with it in the Declaration. We sort of moved away from it a little bit. But
that would be very interesting.
Because I think in this country, we have a mania with property and with other things and everything that goes along with the idea of owning property and dealing with property.
Well, you know what? We would get a lot further if everybody would just come closer and we weren't so polar.
Well, now it's extraordinary. Right?
Yeah.
But,
Oh, and that's the interesting thing. You can't even have a conversation with somebody from the other side of the aisle half the time anymore.
No.
It's like you used to be able to at least sit down, talk to your friends, debate. And it's just like, listen, you could have your own perspective and viewpoints, but be respectful of others' viewpoints. But with the polarization, it's just like, no, you're an idiot. So whatever else, it's just like, okay.
Yes.
But the funny thing is, most people, when they actually take the time to sit down, they probably align on the majority of issues.
Absolutely, they do. It happens every day that I speak to people who are curious or don't want to know, trying to shut me down. We do. We align on most of it, and it's just people's, policy versus personality.
Right.
So you just stay away from that. And like I said, especially in a state like New Jersey, when you can find something like, you talk about money, fiscal responsibility, people start listening.
Or sinkholes.
Off the babies?
Yeah.
Well, there was a sinkhole in the Parkway the other day, too. At exit 114. They shut down the Parkway northbound.
That too?
Yep.
What's going on in New Jersey? It's like built over a honeycomb or something.
Apparently.
But, so what would you say is the biggest accomplishment you've had so far in your political career?
My political career.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's always teamwork. I don't think I have any personal accomplishments. I think I've led certain avenues. I think taking my town from a very fiscal, irresponsible leadership, and we changed it to a more responsible leadership. We changed our mayor and council. The big thing right now is vote by mail. I don't know how much longer it's going to be around. I think it might be around for a little bit longer, but I think they're at least on a federal point of view, I think it might be gone soon. But in my town, we went from being 5 to 1 to 1 to 1.
Okay.
Vote by mail. And also, to be really honest with you, yes, even if I didn't accomplish anything, a couple of people that I spoke to, that I kind of explained some things to them, it made a difference in their life. So I think it was good. Got a good team. It's hard. It's hard with politics because every time you win 2, you fall back 2. You win 2, you might go forward 1, step back 3.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult.
So you never really move anywhere then? You stall circling the drain the whole time?
because in a state like New Jersey, you're constantly fighting and constantly treading water.
It's yeah. New Jersey is very corrupt. I'm going to say that. I think it's it's a fact because
it is.
Yeah.
It's like Mississippi, Arkansas, and New Jersey or something.
It's not even that.
Bangladesh.
I think we were developed. I think our state, when you look back at it, your history. I was a history major and went back to school. Alexander Burr, Vice President Burr shot Alexander Hamilton in New Jersey instead of Aaron Burr. Vice President Aaron Burr, instead of in New York where the fight started, I came across the river because dueling was still allowed in New Jersey.
I think it's still allowed.
Only in road rage incidents.
It's off the books.
It might not be.
But it's interesting.
So no, that was my way to still serve without serving, and just kind of in a selfish kind of way. If I really get tired of it, it becomes overwhelming. You can just step back from it.
Sure.
Once my term is over, I can choose not to run again.
So what brought you to Freemasonry? How was that? How did that transpire?
All right. I was on the island of Sardinia in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay. Long time ago.
Exactly. Right.
Yes.
On a training operation in the Marines, we were training with the French Foreign Legion and the British Royal Marines. And while we were there training, one of my Marines came over and he's like, "Hey, can I go over and talk to those other soldiers thing?" And of course I say no, because every time they get together, usually somebody will say something, then you'll hear, "Well, remember 1776?" And then it's a fight. Okay. So especially if they've been drinking. So, no. So I said, "Okay, go ahead." So I see them talking and again, trading food. I'm like, "What's going on? Come over here. What's going on? Do you ever met those guys before? The couple British Marines, French Foreign Legion?" "No, I never met them before." I said, "Then how do you know them?" He goes, "We're all Masons."
Oh, okay.
Okay. I forget exactly what he was telling me, but I think one of the French Foreign Legion soldiers had, the square compasses.
Sure.
So they just start talking. They overcame the language barrier, but most of the French Foreign Legion, they speak English anyhow. It's one of their prerequisites, I believe. So that kind of like really interested me. And then, I started, there was no internet and cell phones back then. So, when I got back, I went to the base library. I'm starting to see, I started looking up George Washington, Paul Revere. I'm like, wow, these guys basically really helped this nation, this great experiment happen. Is basically, in my opinion, has a lot to do with some Masons. So,
I mean, half the Declaration of Independence, half the Constitution was signed by Masons. You could say that Benjamin Franklin was a Mason. He created, in essence, or helped to create both documents.
Yes.
It's so much.
Well,
even
even
13 and 9. I think it's nine signed the Declaration of Independence and 13 the Constitution.
That's what it is.
And so after that, I was researching it. I was thinking about it, but then I'm deploying constantly. It was like a 8.5 year run. Like I was just sprinting the whole time. Process instead of goals. So
Sure.
I didn't get there. So after that, I went to SEER school, Survival, Evasion, Rescue, and Escape. And there was a staff sergeant that was teaching one of the classes about time management. He said, before we start the class about time management, he said, I'm just giving you, he goes, I'm a math guy. And he said, what's 1 in a million? And then we said, 1 in a million, 1%, what's 0? 0. He goes, so 0, 0. He goes, I'd rather have that one chance. And he goes, I'm not a member and I'm not endorsing it, but everybody in this room is either an operator or pilot. You're in a job that becoming a POW is a possibility.
Possibility, sure.
So he goes, I'd rather have that 1 in a million in my back pocket because it's documented military history that Masons give each other quarter.
Sure.
That is true. Happened during World War II with the Forget-Me-Nots. I mean, that was a huge
World War I, Civil War.
Civil War especially.
So he said, it's just food for thought. Some of the Marines thought about it, some didn't, I don't know, but it resonated with me. So then years later, get out of the military, working. I have a bunch of different jobs that I did. I ended up retiring as a union carpenter. I had my kids are now older, grown. I retire. And I did not do well, so I went back to work. I did not do well with retiring. So I went back to work for another year or two, year and a half, 2 years. And then I said, okay, now I'm ready. So now I retire. So my wife comes to me and she said, well, you better have a hobby. Like you better have something. You're not going to like hang out and try to meet.
Or you surfing the couch around here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she was like, and the gym is already your lifestyle. So I don't want to hear that that's your hobby because, I don't want to hear that. She goes, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to become a Mason. So I went on the internet and I sent a bunch of emails and nobody got back to me. And that's not a shot.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. No, they're not a shot.
Not a shot at the Grey Lodge, but there's a lot of dysfunction, I'll be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're working on it.
Yes. I hear it's getting a lot better. So I made a couple more emails. So then I just took a map out on my phone, drew a circle, and I called the 4 closest lodges. And Fidelity Lodge was
That's your first?
Yep, they answered first. I made a commitment to go over, and I said, "This is for me." It was very easy, and there's a bunch of different reasons, but it was very easy.
You met your mentor, Eric Madsen.
Yep, absolutely. You know what? See, that's one of the things. Eric, I had a lot of mentors. I had a lot, but Eric was a primary.
Eric's a phenomenal guy. Obviously, he's been on the podcast twice already. We love Eric.
No, Eric gave me some direction. Oh, absolutely.
And we love all the internet trolls.
Right. And I had a lot of mentors, and I was very fortunate. I was surrounded. Just think, from the time I was in the 8 till I became a Master Mason, former gold collars like yourself, Roy.
I'm yesterday's meatloaf. But
I was surrounded by a lot of good Masons. So, and it resonates with me because, I already had joined all the father and men's groups, the veteran groups. I'm still a life member of all the veterans.
Sure.
And I actually like the smaller, either I donate to Tunnels to Towers, Wounded Warriors, all of those, but there's smaller I like the smaller activity-based charities like we used to do Unbroken Warrior. We would meet down to Seaside Heights, New Jersey, and we would hike, or back in the military, I would call it humping, but we would ruck with 22 pounds. First, it started with 22 miles, but by the time the end of the season, after doing it 2 or 3 times, I think we ended up doing one time we did 35 miles. Yeah, so it's 22 pounds, 35 miles when we would stop and promote awareness. Somebody would be carrying a flag. My older son, Mike, who's in the Marines currently, he wasn't in the Marines yet. He did one of the 35 miles with me.
Mm-hmm.
He did well. I liked those organizations. They were good. But again, they're not year round. They don't have meetings. So things like the American Legion of VFW, no disrespect. I'm a past post commander. I was also a state officer.
Mm-hmm.
They're polarized, and people don't understand you're a veteran organization. You can't go around and yell at guys who are now out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And some guys, and I don't believe in it turning into life at the bar.
It does revolve around alcohol.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds like.
So when I got to Masonry, it was good because one of the things that I think a lot of Masons who don't have military service don't understand is one of the key things about the military is being a sniper or a scout sniper is we used to have a saying, it was called suffer in silence. So no matter how bad things got, you could complain all you want when you get back, but when you're doing it, you just suffer. That's it. You just do it. You're wet, you're cold, and you're muddy. You still got a job to do. You go forward. Okay. So in that, there's a different type of suffering. I think whether you're in combat or in training, the men around us, see in America, there's so much freedoms and liberties. People just walk around independently.
Right.
They drink their coffee out of paper cups. They got the whole world at their cell phone. They drive their cars with AC. In the military, it's almost like that collective. You have a platoon of guys. And this goes for the combat guys and the guys that just were in training with. You suffer together, okay? And it builds a camaraderie. Some of my best memories, some of my most endearing memories of my guys, myself, was during these suffering periods. So when we're in lodge, it's not at the same level, but think about it. It's not military, it's civilian. Learning a ritual, practicing, getting together. Everybody's complaining in their cars on the way to go someplace in a suit to do it. But then when they get there and the show light comes on, boom, everybody steps, everybody goes. So you're working at it together. And that's why when I came up through as an EA, that's why I said I had a lot of mentors, because I had a ton of questions and I had a ton of experienced guys that they helped out. And it made my first, I haven't even been a Master Mason a year yet. It made my first, my first year and a half, almost 2 years, fantastic. I've traveled to over 24 different lodges. I've been to numerous installations. I've seen you at like half of them.
Probably, yeah.
And there's receptions.
I have a problem.
Yes. So it, it just goes. And then it's great because the fraternity is fantastic. So I look forward to traveling. I've traveled out of state. I went to other lodges out of state. So it's been a good time.
Yeah, I think from a process perspective, obviously that really fills your void.
Absolutely, because I think a lot of guys, here's what happened. Well, all right, I'm going to join. You joined. All right, now I'm going to become a Master Mason. Become a Master Mason. Well, now I want to be an officer. Oh, you become an officer. All right, well, now I want to be this officer. Well, you can't be that officer right now. Boom, it explodes. They're hurt and they leave and they don't want to come back and there's favoritism and all that. Or they get that spot. So now, all right, now you made it to you made it all the way down. And they just feel empty because they're just goal oriented instead of it just being a process.
The next carrot.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I think there's too many title chasers and people that are just trying to achieve that goal. And I think that's where they're not respecting the process. And really the process and the service to all the brethren and serving all of Freemasonry. And I think, Alex and I are past masters, and we've had this conversation many times, but I always felt as master, I was there serving everybody else.
Absolutely.
So even though
It's before self.
exactly, and no matter what, it's like, sure, I had my own viewpoints. I might have had my own opinions, sheds and other things, but whatever the case,
It was never your shed.
But with all that being said, I was there to serve everybody, and I felt that altruism, and to me, that was a quality of leadership. It's just like, it's not about me. It's not about my ego. It's about everybody leaving their ego at the door, coming into that building. We're all there for one another and serving the Brotherhood. And I think if we do that across every lodge and even at the Grand Lodge level, I really think the fraternity would start going in upward trajectory.
Yeah, there are some concerted efforts to start to do that. Brother Art Campbell's doing a lot on the membership front, and a lot of these other guys. And look,
I think they're doing well.
They're doing a fantastic job.
Brother Di Gaetano and myself on the retention committee and such. And yeah, we're putting in a lot of but it's we're a little late to the party, if I'm being honest. I mean, we lost a lot of good people. Better late than never, obviously, and we can build from here. But it's our current Grandmasters, which we know very well. One of his big efforts is dealing with the MPDs, the non-payment of dues, Franks, that have just kind of washed out because there wasn't enough communication with fraternity, which is now getting a lot better. So that's a wonderful thing.
Well, communication, and I think what you've experienced is fantastic, having true mentors. Because I think a lot of guys, they came in, they got their Master Mason. They were just like, all right, yeah, go, you want to take an officer chair next year? And nobody mentored them. Nobody sat there and actually taught them anything. And I think part of that was you had possibly a generation that didn't really know how to mentor people.
Well, and I think, and I think some of them people that didn't know how to mentor people, leadership, are the same ones that, they don't realize it. Probably in a lodge, if you had 50 people that haven't been coming around, I bet you anything, if you called all 50 people and just took 5 minutes, like decent polls, I bet you get one back, two back, maybe more.
Probably more.
I'll tell you for what it's worth. And Dave knows this. Very recently, we had an issue where one of our lodges, Madison Lodge in the 11th district, went away, which was a tragedy, an absolute tragedy. It was a beautiful lodge with a lot of money and a lot of stuff, but regardless, not going to get into the nitty gritty of it all. But when they went away, a lot of the members that were members that may have lived outside of the state or were older, weren't coming out the lodge much, hadn't come out in years, but were still a part of things. People weren't calling them, and there wasn't a communication system set up. I mean, the bare minimum was done. Emails were sent and other things like that, and some guidance was provided. But when I called these guys, they were kind of, rudderless. They had no idea what was really going on. And they said, well, we'd like to join another lodge, but we don't really know. We don't have a great direction. So, I took it upon myself, not just myself, but other guys from Condon Overlook over in Bernardsville. And we said, look, come join us. We'd love to have you. Some of you guys are close. Some of you are not so close. There's guys in Virginia, New Hampshire, North Carolina, other places, Florida. But they said, listen, when we're in town, we'd still love to have a lodge that we affiliate with in New Jersey. So we said, great, let us be that lodge. Let us help you. So, and we got some flack and some issues from guys who are like, Masonry is, you don't recruit in Freemasonry. And so we said, well, what does that mean? So we talked to the Grandmaster, and Grandmaster said, oh, these guys are Master Masons. There's no recruitment issue here. You can call any of them, and they can go wherever they want. So we said, great, let's do that. And and again, guys like Art Campbell, guys like the guys in membership, they take these opportunities, they push the envelope forward. And it's a wonderful thing, because now we're making real strides in communicating with why Masonry is relevant to the modern guy, which is different than, what our grandfathers found important. Or,
right.
They just wanted to stay out of the house, and they didn't like their wives or whatever the case may be, where they didn't want to be around. And, well, it's funny because on some level, I spoke to one of the old timers at my lodge, and I spoke to his son at one point, and I asked him, well, why didn't you want to be a Mason? He said, why would I want to join something that kept my father away from me? Now, this was back in the 70s, right? This is not today at all. I just want to make that point. Not at all today. But at that point, a lot of guys, this was like, oh, my wife's bothering me, I'm going to go to the lodge. So I, get away from her, or whatever the case may be. So, but these days, people come to the fraternity for much different things, for self-improvement, for camaraderie, for other things like that. So I think that's a very important point to make.
I think we're also the same thing. The reason that the American Legion, the BFW, we have tons of veterans.
Sure.
But they have all-time lows because there's no sense of community after you get out of the military, because we're using words, we've been just doing it for the past 20 minutes. We're talking about service before self. Service. Well, what if you replace service with suffer? See, you suffer together, you serve together. See, the only thing that the military has that Masonry doesn't is a contract that says if you just try and walk away from it, you'll go to jail. You'll go to jail. So, but I like
some district deputies, man, that are not too far.
I know, but see, I like the volunteer part of it.
They just don't give them rifles.
Yes, exactly. All the rods are bad now.
Exactly.
It's no, I really don't. I like seeing it going in the right direction. And like I said, I'm very, very fortunate. I'm at a point in my life where I can spend time. I have a very supportive family.
It's a beautiful thing.
And I'm surrounded by Masons that are not only good mentors and good teachers, but they got the knowledge, so I'm very, very fortunate.
And let's not, we gloss over it sometimes because we focus more on either the leadership stuff, which we will in a second, and other things, but let's not forget just the fellowship friend aspect, right? As guys get older, it's harder to make friends because where are you going to meet them, right? So unless it's like you're with your old college buddies or maybe some friends from work or something like that, but those guys who are maybe the bar, whatever it is, or if you're part of an athletic league, but outside of that, we don't have that milieu, so to speak, that you have when you're younger, where you can find friends pretty easily and make friends, and you start to get calcified in certain ways as you get older.
Well, I think men are kind of we have outlets, family, a job, okay,
sure,
and then nothing. Like we got to have that,
like nothing else.
You gotta have that other thing. Again, it goes with the process of, trying to move forward. And like you said, it's very hard to meet guys. You join an organization, it's a bad one or it's a really toxic one.
Yeah.
So now you just sit home, aggravate the crap out of your wife, torture your kids. But no, my family's very supportive. And so I have, my faith and I have my family. Okay. And I have my investments instead of working, but then I have the lodge. I have a group of men that care about me and I care about them.
Well, I think that's the human conundrum now because we're more connected than ever, but people are so secluded and isolated from each other.
Again, that's putting in the work.
Right.
It's easy. It's too easy to pull the phone out. I think I was closer to any of my friends growing up than my son is to any of his friends.
Yeah.
Because they get on their cell phone and they do this. So my son asked me when he was a lot younger, Dad, how'd you know where your friends were at? I said, I had to get on my bike and ride around the entire neighborhood till I found another pile of bikes.
Exactly. You saw all the bikes in the front yard. It's like, that's where my friends
are. Phone. We weren't allowed to touch the phone, which was hanging on the wall.
Sure.
So it's, I don't know. I think it's putting the work in. That's why I honestly believe, because obviously the fraternity had to conform to laws.
Right.
If I would have joined during COVID, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah, but again, that's not the fault of the fraternity so much as it's the fault, because I gotta say, if you're gonna fault institutions,
right,
I would fault churches at the top of that list, because, and I spoke to some of the local priests, Catholic priests and other such. I talked to my Orthodox priest. I spoke with a bunch, and they said, well, we can't open churches. It's too dangerous or whatever. I said, if you're not here for the people at the time of great suffering, what the hell are you for? What is the point of you, right? So it's kind of like, well, we have to clean the church every time somebody, so clean the church. I mean, it's like, what else do you have to do? Like, you're there supposed to be for the comfort of people. Like, it just doesn't
It's like, wait a minute, what do you do normally?
Well-
Junk clean?
Well, no, because you know what else though. Remember, just think back. There were plenty of churches where, you know, towns, and unfortunately the police were forced in arresting people at churches and shutting the churches down and
Yeah.
chaining the doors. So I believe it's Thomas Jefferson, you know, fears the passion of slaves, you know, and there was just so much fear. Unfortunately, maybe you could tell from my attitude, my demeanor, I was the guy getting thrown out of Home Depot because I refused to put a mask on, or I took it off, or I wouldn't walk with the arrows, and I wouldn't social distance. That was me. That was my life for 2 years, constantly getting in trouble.
Yeah, I was right there with you. But I mean, I remember when the gyms first opened up again, going back, and it's like they wanted you to wear a mask, and you know they checked your temperature.
Yes.
It's like literally, I walked in, my mask was like around my neck, like down here, and I was just like, "Yeah, check my temperature." I was like, "Whatever, I don't give a shit what it is." It's like
Well,
I'm working out.
we have beards, so the masks weren't going to work for us. regardless.
Well, exactly.
On any level.
Very
on
true.
every level. I have too many, you know, classes,
Yeah.
OSHA classes to know that, hey, it just doesn't work. But I was that guy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In a selfish way, though, I'll tell you, I brought all my kids home. We spent a lot of time together, so
Sure.
we made the best of it.
It was beautiful. It was one of the greatest summers I've ever had. It took me back to being a kid because I got to enjoy like almost every day of that summer, be outside and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
how often as an adult can you do that? You know, it was like taking a vacation, like a real vacation where you couldn't, you know.
And the good, and like I said, you know, I got all my neighbors. I generally like all of them, but you know, you got that one. It was great during COVID because they'd start walking over to the fence. You act like you don't see them walk inside. It's gone in 30 minutes. He ain't gonna follow you into the yard because everybody's too scared, you know? It was like, you know, it's kind of like a little like, okay, you know?
That is funny.
Just walk around, cough.
But let me ask you this. A crucible of a battlefield strips identity down to its core values, let's say.
Okay.
How does your deployment clarify when you found more meaningful stuff like Freemasonry's moral teachings? In other words, now that you're part of the fraternity, can you sort of put that together with your time in the military? And are there commonalities? Are there parallels in there?
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels on so many different levels. I mean, obviously, I'm a person of faith, so that, you know, that overrides everything. But I absolutely see it like with service to each other, pay service to your men, you know, and if you can't take care of them, they're not going to take care of you,
Mhm.
and then your shit's not wired, you know.
You get the weak shit.
You get the weak shit. If your shit is weak, you know. But I will tell you the other side, weak, okay? Anything weak is not good. But the best accolade, the best compliment you could give a Marine I was in was that he's hard.
Hmm.
It was kind of
That way you can't roll out of bed.
no. When you're hard, exactly. I get that. But when you're
Oh,
hard,
God.
it's one of
He
those
went
guys. It's not that you were the toughest or anything. It goes deeper. Like you'd see a guy, he'd be walking for 20 miles and it's raining and he's a hard dude. Like he could just keep going. And because like with Masonry, motivation comes and goes. But discipline and perseverance is that's again the process. And as I go up and starting to go through the chairs, and again, like going in rank, and when you're doing ritual, one thing can't happen unless something else happens. Same thing in the military. If you guys don't do that, we're gonna get screwed.
Right.
And yes, and caring, are the love and affection. I mean, you just take care of each other. So there's so many of them I can't even mention, and that's why I'm at where I'm at. Because in veteran organizations, it's gotten polarized where they go over the line with policy versus personality, and then it's, well, the only reason he's the commander is when he was in the Army 45 years ago, he did this, and he's only half the man he used to be, and it blows up. Masonry, everybody's on the level. Peace and Harmony Lodge. I mean, it works. It works for me.
So that's an interesting point. So combat cells demand adaptive leadership, I would say, a lot. Lodge leadership often requires patience and consensus. What kind of lessons have you carried from one form of leadership to the other? Because obviously in combat, you got to be a little bit more forceful. It's your way of the highway because it's combat, right?
Right.
You just said it. Peace and harmony is the strength and support of all institutions, especially this of ours,
Correct.
in terms of Masonry. So, how does that jive?
Well, I'm more of a conservative kind of person, so I just don't believe in the feelings and the participation trophies and things like that. But out here, no, you can't yell at other Masons. You can't force them. No one's going to die. Okay. So you have to do almost more positive reinforcement instead of negative reinforcement. And that there's a bigger emphasis on lead by example out here, because sometimes in the military, you can lead by example and you can do a million great things. You make one mistake and that's all anybody ever remembers you for.
Sure.
I think you get a little bit more flexibility out here. So why not with the flexibility, put on a bigger jacket, shoulder a little more weight, and lead a little bit more by example. Like, not for me. I did it as not even as a process, as a goal. During my process, I turned around and I received the Gold King Solomon Award and the Vrely Award. And that was for me as a goal because I wanted to learn more about Masonry.
Sure.
But in a way, down deep inside, I got those 2 awards for the guys behind me because I want to show them, like, with hard work and respect, you can, and just discipline, again, discipline and perseverance. Not only can you have a good time, have tons of fellowship, but if you work hard, it pays off.
Sure.
And I've learned a lot and I'm doing a lot. So again, that's how I took a lot of that over.
Think about the Hograd Academy. That's part of the Scottish Rite. They have an award. It's like the Society of King Solomon, but kind of taken up like to another level magnitude. Because you have to write a pretty involved paper to get it, and it's on a predetermined topic. But you can really geek out with the research of that and really kind of get into it, especially if it's something like maybe leadership. You have to do something relating to the 6 core values of the Scottish Rite. So Scottish Rite being
and not only that,
Freemasonry.
I got some experience because when I think you were aware of this, when I wrote my first paper, I did the online part,
Sure.
and when I wrote my first paper, they kicked it back, right? So I got a no-go, I got it failed. And you know why? Because I was so excited to do it, okay? And I was trying to geek out on it. They said, your paper was great. You wrote it in the wrong format. So when they kicked it back and they pointed out, look, you should go deeper here and you should do this. But really, you didn't do it in the right format. You got to cite it like this. As soon as I changed it all and just dove a little deeper, then I started uncovering more stuff that I wanted to write about. It actually worked out.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And now I can pass that on to a junior, a new Mason.
Yeah,
That's good. And I'll say, listen, make sure you read the bottom of page 2 about the format. Stupid. You know what I'm saying? I have something to give. I have something to offer even guys that, even though I'm actually, I am the newest Master Mason in my lodge.
I believe so. Yeah.
And I'm an honorary member of Phoenix. And
They got to get busy making more Masons over there.
they're trying. Matter of fact, I'm an honorary member at Phoenix Lodge.
Great lodge also. Amalgamated lodge came together recently between was it Hawthorne, Fortitude, and Silentia, lodges that merged together to form Phoenix Lodge.
Right.
They have an EA degree this month, and they have 4 EAs. And then we have 2 more Master Masons coming up next month in Fidelity. So we're working on it. Slow and steady.
So one thing I wanted to ask, you said you're a spiritual person. Obviously, your faith is important to you. Not to get into alchemy and transmutation and such, but we can briefly touch on it.
Sure.
But, how would you say, your combat experience and then coming out of the military and then obviously now this journey of Masonry from a spiritual journey perspective and, the changes within you from that perspective spiritually, like, how would you say that defined you, changed you, and now with this transmutation you're going through in Freemasonry, was that your process and evolution, or
I think that's always been my process. I'm not a big destiny guy, but I think that's always been my process. In a civilian way of putting it, I think it's probably one of the most fulfilling and best parts of my process, next to being a parent.
Sure.
Spiritually, I'm more of an apostolistic or almost an Orthodox Christian.
Okay.
But
yeah, apostolic, right?
yes, it absolutely helps out as far as putting it in military terms. It made me a hard motherfucker. I'll be very honest with you.
Never rolls out of bed.
That's it. No, it hardened me to things that I didn't want to do, and I think it really, coming out of combat, coming out of the military, becoming a father, all of this process, I think it made me a better man.
What does they say? It anneals like a blade, right? So they basically that idea of the hot and cold, and it's sort of what do they call it? Tempers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's and it sharpened me, and it made me
Very sharpens iron, as they say.
and it made me it definitely I think it all together makes me a better Christian. It makes me a better father, a better husband, and a better Mason, because it's all keeps going in the process.
So is there anything from your military experience and your training that you still use in your everyday life? Are you sticking to like a regimented schedule, or waking up at 4 a.m., going to the gym or whatever?
Well, no. I went to the gym today.
Some people.
I went to the gym today. I get up at roughly, I cheat now. I'm older, so I cheat. I get up about 5:30 and I lay in bed and think about things that I need to do until about 5:30. And then I get up. I'm there for my daughter.
Yeah.
She's getting ready to go to school. Me and my wife get her off to school. Then I kick my wife out. Tell her to go make me some money. And then
Make Papa some money.
that's it. And then
a pair of shoes.
she's gonna watch this, and I'm gonna get spanked.
He's gonna get shanked later.
No, I'm gonna tell you, my wife she is my rock. She is everything to me. But then I go to the gym, and there's even long periods of time where I had to take breaks, either from injuries or just for social things. And my wife will look at me and said, "You need to go back to the gym. You need to," even though she didn't see me all day. And then I went right to a lodge meeting and stayed all night. The next day, she's like, "I can just tell by the way you're walking around here, the expressions on your face, you don't want to go back to the gym." So, and I even changed that up. But yeah, the regimented lifestyle, me and my wife are planners. I got a calendar. I used to write everything down. Now my kids and my wife make me put it in my phone. Let me think what else I do. There's bad parts of it. It could go as far as PTSD.
Oh,
Okay. Because I'm diagnosed, I have PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And obviously I'm a recipient of the Purple Heart. So I have some physical disabilities from it. But if it's one of those days, I'm feeling it, and I don't want to say no because I want to be part of my children's life, to go to a diner, and I'll sit down in the booth with my wife and my daughter, and while they're talking, now I know how many people, I know how many doors, how many exits, how many place settings, how many people are coming in and out of the kitchen. Makes me hypersensitive. Can go bad or it can be okay. Depends. So there's good and bad to it, but I think living a more of a regimented lifestyle like I do, like I know Sunday morning, go to church, you come back, go to the gym. I don't leave those openings. I don't leave them open too much.
Sure.
have you thought about or gone to any sort of therapy for
Yes.
any of this? Okay. And you found that that's helpful?
Depending on what level that you're at, as you guys know, I've been talking about it. My conservative kind of lifestyle, my beliefs. Believe it or not, I am a big advocate for some of the more natural things that it works. Cannabis works for some military. Some of the edibles and things like that. It doesn't do good for me, but there are some vets that swear by it, and I watch their lives improve. And then there's some psychosomatic kind of
psychedelic. Psychedelic entheogen, they call it. Although that's really not a term I care for, because it's actually too limiting for what a lot of these things are. But stuff like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, or LSD to some extent.
Some of my veteran friends swear by it.
I consider LSD like a spiritual and emotional roto-rooter. So it gets in there and it's just like the garbage bin of spiritual stuff. And it just like flushes out a lot of the stuff that you don't want anymore away.
No, I'm one of those people, because they were like, yeah, but your side says, I don't care. I've seen too much positive.
You can't be two-dimensional about any of this stuff. And that's what I think the news and a lot of things, they take such pains to create two teams as if like everybody's stratified. It's not the case. It's like people are going across the aisle all the time for different things. And as you said, we agree on much more than we disagree on.
Absolutely.
And so, but they want to point to this little thing because they make money on it. Let's be honest. Entertainment, right?
Exactly. If you take away big pharma, the earth has a lot of natural remedies to, granted, I'm not necessarily saying the earth was designed to remedy PTSD from combat or something, but I'm sure.
Actually, I believe it is.
It probably is, because considering mankind's been fighting since practically day one, it seems like.
I think it's always been around. Yeah, I just think, there was a time you didn't speak about it, but I absolutely believe it's always been around. Even when we had shorter lifespans. Yeah. I think it was absolutely around.
But do you know what almost all warrior cultures did? After a war, they would sit around the fire and tell stories.
Right.
And those stories that they would sit over a flagon of beer at the tavern or whatever it was around the fire earlier, because that unloads you. You tell the story, you take joy in it, in the battle and what happened and that kind of thing. Like, oh, you see Olaf, he got his head chopped off by an axe or something like that. He's in Valhalla now or whatever it is. But it's a coping mechanism of kind of thing to bring that into life, and then not to dull the hard edges of these experiences.
Say, if you go to the VA, their idea of this therapy is exactly 45 minutes in a room. Man will talk to you. And you will turn around and he's going to prescribe you pills.
Yeah.
And pills upon pills. Yeah. Because all their pills have side effects.
Of course.
Whereas if you go to something, and I'm not advertising, and hopefully not, but in New Jersey, there's a thing called the Vet Center. And the Vet Center, while they work with the VA, they're a separate entity upon themselves. When you go to therapy, you sit in a circle on the bonfire with all the veterans and the therapists, and you talk it out, just like we used to around a campfire. You talk it out. And they helped me tremendously. And all the therapists are either combat veterans, or people who have lived with, or their family members were combat veterans.
Did you see that documentary? I told Dave about that. I actually sent them a clip of it. I don't remember the name of it, but we'll put it in the comments below. There's a documentary where they go to prison in California, and you stay there. I mean, you don't stay overnight at the prison, but you go there for about 3 to 5 days, and you sit in a circle with the prisoners. So it's prisoners and civilians all sitting in a circle, talking about feelings, talking about how it is to be in the prison, regrets about life, other things like that, what they could have done differently, or, really opening themselves up and being that sort of vulnerable. And these are like bad dudes, right?
So it's not like a scared straight thing. It's more like more like a session.
It's much more like a session. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like you have to see that people are going to be people. They made mistakes. They ended up in prison. They did what they, and some of them might be monsters on some level, but they're people too. It's an interesting thing to think about, and how they get their own PTSD in prison for other reasons, and and all that, or the past experiences that landed them in prison that gave them PTSD and so on. So it's a lot of how do you deal with that kind of thing?
Oh,
Very, very cool.
and the other thing, we had Dr. Freddie Starr on.
Oh yeah,
He's a brilliant individual, and he swears by alternative medicine as well.
yeah, and he prescribes. I mean, he's a psychiatrist, right? But he actually has this brain software where you hook it up and you do these brain exercises that are supposed to retrain your brain in many ways. It's fascinating. He said he's going to do a special price for Masons to experience it. You got to do like 20 sessions or 30 sessions, to really get the full benefit, I think, in a lot.
Oh, I thought you were telling me it's like a way to remember all the stuff.
I could teach you some memory stuff if you want.
I mean, I think Elon's working on that with Neuralink, maybe, or,
Yeah.
then you can regurgitate the cipher book word for word.
The reality is it's fear that keeps you from remembering everything. Because if a lot of actors, they'll just look at something and they'll be like, all right. And then,
Well, see, that's the part of the process. My ultimate goal, I don't want to be a regurgitator.
Mhm.
I want to present it. I want to,
the whole point of that is if you can understand what's happening, right? So you really understand the meaning of the ritual, then it doesn't matter if you're a word or two off because it's not the point. I think that's where we put the cart before the horse in Masonry. It's all about, you got to get a letter perfect. Why? You got to memorize and convey the meaning of the ritual. That's what is important about the
The
ritual.
meaning and the intent behind it.
right. That may be the most important, but I will go back on one thing. Like, you ever see the ribbons on a uniform?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a meme out there, and as a matter of fact, he's the general of the Marine Corps, and he says, the ribbons, it's 1/8 of an inch off the pocket. And he goes, can anybody tell me why? Why is it 1/8 inch off the pocket? And all the Marines are looking around, and he goes, because we made it up. Because we made it up, right? And everybody's thinking about it. He goes, it's just attention to detail so that you become detail orientated. And I think the meaning and the delivery, I think are very important. But I think the discipline of learning the cipher and learning the floor work, because instead of
It's wearing the ink, right?
right.
So, yeah.
So if you're always 1/8 of an inch and you tell your gun emplacement, like, I need you to shoot an azimuth at 262, he's not going to be 263 or 264. He's going to be 262.
Mhm.
And while it's not life or death, but if you do that detailed orientated kind of thing during, doing ritual, it'll make it better. But like I said, I don't think it's more important than being word for word. I think the meaning and delivery is more important, but I think that detail, attention to detail is important. And I think the discipline of learning it is important as well. Because let's face it, there are tons of people out there that sit in a chair or whatever, and they really don't, I don't want to use the word empty soup, but they don't have everything they need because you just said it. Wants to be an officer and everybody scatters,
Well, and again, it's the intention behind the ritual. And honestly, it's in some ways, like, I understand why we're doing it, but realistically, you should only have one candidate per degree. And if you really do it the right way, that room, you're inviting deity in there when you open, you're going through a spiritual process. There's the transmutation throughout the degrees. And it is truly a special thing. Unfortunately, we kind of diminish that by having not only the people that are just regurgitating it and don't actually know what it's about, they don't have the intent behind it. And on top of that, they're just reciting the ritual, right? I think if we really take a step back, and I think that's where education probably comes into play here, but if you truly read that ritual, to Alex's point, I mean, being scared or whatever else, I remember the first time I did the Entered Apprentice degree from the East, which, you get up and I remember, like, literally, my mind went blank. I was just like, uh-oh.
I think it happens.
And I was just standing there like a deer in the headlights, like, what am I supposed to do right now? I was like, I know this. I've been through this a million times. We've rehearsed this, but I was like, wow, I don't remember anything at the moment. And, it's like I think I raised the lodge and everybody just looked at me like, I was just like, yep, just stretching everybody's legs. Have a seat.
That's all right. Well,
But
and no, that's a really it's true. I just think you can.
but then it just, eventually it just kind of came back and clicked. It's like, oh yeah, okay. Now I know what I'm supposed to do. But from that perspective, and I'm not sure, Alex, how you felt about it, but anytime going through that ritual, I just always wanted to pass that energy to the candidate to truly have them feel that experience.
Well, now we're going to get into some esoteric stuff then. So, the idea of egregores, does that make sense to you? So the Marine Corps absolutely has an egregore. There's no question about it. Even if you've never heard of egregores in your life, and I say it's Marine Corps, boom, you immediately think of at least probably a dozen things that the Marine Corps clearly embodies.
Mhm.
And by the way, there was an interesting talk where for a couple of years there were Barbary pirates that were kidnapping Americans. And Thomas Jefferson was somewhere around there, and he met with one of the ambassadors of the Barbary pirates, and he said, "Why are you kidnapping Americans? We never did anything to you." And he said, "Well, we believe that, if you're not Islamic, you're nothing, and we don't care. And we're just going to keep doing it because we don't care." And he goes, "You're going to force me to call the Marines in and light your world on fire." And he wasn't persuaded, but that's where you get from the halls of Montezuma to those shores of Tripoli, right? So they went to Tripoli and basically rearranged those guys' whole existence. And then you got the Berber sword, right?
Yes.
That's part of the uniform.
Mhm.
Now, so it's pretty fast. Can you tell me more about that story or anything else that was
Well,
a little left out?
no, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, it was one of the first, I guess, deployments of the Marine Corps because we had a lot of different jobs. First, we started as marksmen up in the tops, up in the crow's nest, the ships.
That's how the British would have it. That's how the British Navy used the Marines.
Right. And that's how the officers have the hydrofoil on top of the white hat.
Mhm.
That's so we didn't shoot officers through the top of the head. Okay, on both sides. And it's funny because a lot of Marine speakers will turn around, they'll talk about the Barbary pirates
Mhm.
or from the halls of Montezuma, the Mexican-American War, the red blood stripes for the Battle of Chapultepec, all of those things, the Bulldog, which was kind of bastardized. But when they talk about all of that stuff, the one thing in common that when we would always have a guest speaker from another nation, they would come and they said, we always strictly informed our leaders from the generals all the way down to the privates, don't kill the Marine officers. Even modern today, try never to kill the Marine officers. And that was because they said the Marine officers are the ones that control the Marines. Because if there was no Marines, there's no decorum. We saw it in Vietnam.
Right.
We saw it in Vietnam. I think it was 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines. They lost all their officers. And then they literally did such it's horrible things that they did.
Yeah.
That they actually got a bounty put on them, and then the North Viet Cong came down and they wiped them out.
Wow.
One of my first sergeant majors was like one of the 22 men out of the reinforced battalion. He was one of the last ones left.
Wow.
And they had it coming to them. They were the ones that did war atrocities. They did wrong things, but because they didn't have any officers to give them guidance. But you have the Marine Corps Bulldog. That's you just see it. You see the Marine Corps Bulldog.
Mhm.
That's actually, it was supposed to be more of like a hellhound,
Mhm.
and that comes from the First World War.
Mhm.
We're called Hounds from hell.
Devil dogs.
Devil dogs.
Right.
Because of the Battle of Belleau Woods in the First World War against the Germans. So yes, I'm familiar with that. Being able to see some and
You wanted to go esoteric.
Well, yeah. So, what esotericism means secret teachings, right? As opposed to exoteric, which is the more exterior stuff. Clearly, and we talked about this during your Force Recon days, there's stuff that was secret. There's probably is not to be talked about, maybe not even to this day, because a lot of stuff, may or may not have been.
you'd be surprised. Most of it's declassified.
So you know how to keep a secret.
Yes.
and you know how to do things that are, sub rosa kind of thing. Masonry also has, I mean, I wouldn't call it a secret society. Otherwise, you wouldn't have guys with square compasses on their hats running around as much, even though the Europeans don't do their Masonry that way, and other places. But how does that feeling and that understanding of sort of the both the regimentation and all that stuff, and the reason I say it, and I'm making this question extra long, but after your force recon days and your recon days, you were a civilian contractor for a little bit, and that's a whole different animal, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not, because you don't have the regimentation, you don't have the uniform, you don't have a lot of the stuff that would identify you as a combatant. And so then you're doing stuff that on a whole other level, definitely in that more clandestine way. So, how does that how do those two worlds jive? The clandestine aspect of military life and the clandestine aspect of of Freemasons.
It's such a different animal. Getting out and being, well, first, when you say the word operator, everybody thinks of 13 hours.
Okay.
Sure.
Or 0 Dark 30s.
Well, Zero Dark 30 was the hunt for Osama bin Laden,
right.
and that was a SEAL team. That's active.
Yeah.
That was a SEAL team. But Benghazi, 13 hours. They're American contractors who were hired by the CIA. Okay. I don't think that they don't get the recognition that they deserve, and there's a lot of them being used. Okay. But again, it's just part of the job. I worked for an actual company. I worked for the Vanel Corporation, and they were guarding an embassy. They were supposed to be break glass in case of war. That's never going to happen, and it did. So that's why they got caught in. I was never in any situation like that. I went over clearly to be an instructor. I was supposed to teach the Saudis and the Kuwait how they were rebuilding their police forces and their National Guards. And we were there. I was strictly there to teach small infantry unit tactics and CQB. But what happens is when you go over, again, in the real world, not in the United States, in the real world, especially in that region of the world, things need to be done for money. And they need to be done right now, or there's going to be bad consequences for it.
What does that mean? Or what does that?
A United States senator, congressman, or even higher needs a certain group of people to reach the airport. But we have no active military people, and he doesn't have a tier 1 of SEALs ready to go. He'll contact the Vanel Corporation, or he'll contact Blackwater, or who has that area, and say, listen, for this much money, you got to get these group of people from point A to point B.
Sure.
So now you got, and they do have teams to do that, but sometimes their teams are already doing other things. So money talks, bullshit walks. So they turn around and they take the instructors and they say, are you willing to do this? And you're being paid really, really well.
Yeah.
So when they make really, really well to astronomically, oh my God, a lot of the guys do it. Well, those lines get blurred, and then before you know it, you're doing the wrong thing. And that's why I only spent a year doing it, even with travel time. I did it for 1 year. I signed a contract for 6 months for the first time. I went over. I didn't like their vetting process. We had accidental discharges. We had negligent discharges. We had people coming in that were supposed to be training who really, they still were on the side of, Saddam Hussein. Like, they don't even want to be there. Or they're a radical Islamic person that just believes that his one goal or process is to take out these operators, even though we're British and Australian and American. We just work for a corporation.
Right.
And that's what the problem is. I never had a problem with making good money. I always had doing something merely for money. That, again, is, to me, fundamentally, spiritually, not always a good thing.
That reminds me of Warren Zevon's song, Rolling the Headless Thompson Gunner. I don't know if you know. Basically, the whole idea comes out with they made a deal somewhere in Norway or Denmark to go to Biafra and fight in the Congo War, basically. So they go down and they're he brought his Thompson gun down and he'd kill whatever needed killing. So I guess that's a way to do life. And frankly, it's a well-worn profession. It's been around since probably the beginning of time. The strong man, the heavy, the supports. It's what it is.
No, it's part. It's 100% part of our culture. But the good thing is you have the ability to walk away from it. Because it's not a forced thing; it's a volunteer thing. You volunteer to go there. You're being paid, but they didn't come and press gang you into it.
No.
So,
they used to.
Yes, they used to.
The day,
but you are getting paid well.
That's kind of the point, right?
Exactly.
So, you get scurvy or something.
So being a contractor was great. Being an instructor was good. I got to see, even though I'd already seen those parts of the world, I got to see another side of it. And yeah, the money was great, but there was no fulfillment. Okay. And I made some good friends on the way, but it was not the same as the military. I think when I got out of the military, I was still upset on different levels. I was upset that I got out, but then I was upset like I wanted to get out. So why am I being upset, And then I had some personal issues. So it was like it bothered me. And as far as that relating to Masonry, I don't know. I don't know that much about the clandestine side of Masonry. I only know.
Stick around. Dave, you got anything you want to?
That was kind of a random question, but I was going to ask. So, you're doing the private security things of that nature. I know, like, there's so many things on YouTube nowadays about. You got the SEAL team, you got Delta, then you have kind of the CIA. There's all different levels. It's like, did you ever, kind of in your travels come across some of those folks? Because I feel like some of the guys that were in Delta just seems like everybody's like, yeah, they were just like these regular dudes just showed up in like cargo shorts and like a t-shirt.
Absolutely.
And they're just over there and they're just like, yeah, we're just going to use the range, fuck shit up and leave. See you guys later.
Yes, absolutely. Again, just to touch, I went into the regular infantry, I was a regular grunt, and the training was good and it was hard, and we there's a lot of camaraderie. But to be honest with you, in a selfish way, I didn't want to be that guy that got on we used to get online and these police calls, and you'd have to walk the grounds and pick cigarette butts up and stuff. So after I went to, and that's just the
penal
colony.
Right?
Yeah. But the whole Marine Corps is like that. Like you got to take the good with the bad.
Right.
But then I noticed, well, wait a minute. I left the grunts. I went to Stapleton. Wait a minute. Not only don't I have to ever do battalion formations again, no one questioned me about my uniform, and I don't have to pick up cigarette butts. Right? So, and then then I went to Recon. Not only did they put us on our own place on base, other people weren't allowed to come near us. So it made it even better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the deeper you got, the better it was. So yes, absolutely. In my travels, peacetime, wartime, deployment, back here at the States, you will meet some of the most sketchy. When I was in Operation Just Cause in 1989, we went to the country of Panama to bring Noriega back for crimes against the United States, stop the flow of drugs. There was a lot more to it than that.
Sure.
All right. So when we were there, I actually got to work with some special forces operators special forces soldiers who were advisors who had been in country months and months before we even got there. And we were there before the main force got there. And we did a lot of reconnaissance and sent the information back to the rear. And yes, we met plenty of people. This guy showed up like he just got done surfing, and he had a government clearance, and he had a private helicopter, and he came in and he said, call these guys and have them just shoot a missile over there and blow that building totally up. And they did. And he was looked and he's like, awesome. And he got back in the helicopter and flew away.
So let me ask you a question about, so we talked about PTSD. We didn't really talk about like the dark triad of human traits.
Okay.
Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy.
Okay.
There has to be, on some level, some coefficient of, or parallel of, guys that run towards danger and psychopathic behavior.
Absolutely.
Not on the whole, obviously, but some of those guys have got to be off their rocker on that level. Like a complete lack of empathy.
Mhm.
No interest in human life as opposed to a bug or a human is similar or the same kind. Do you run across that kind of thing?
All the time. No, I'm recipient of Purple Heart it was 3 days before the ground war actually started. We were getting in battles. I was attached to 2nd LAI, 2nd Light Armored Infantry Battalion, which are these little armored vehicles, tread wheels.
Yep.
They're like little tanks, and they're really fast, and they're great when they're employed. And the Marines that man them are awesome. So we were doing there. We do long range reconnaissance off of them or getting helicopters. But we got in a gun battle, and I didn't mind it because it was against the Republican Guard. We knew exactly who we were fighting. There was minimal civilians around. It was like a small little village, like an intersection, like in the middle of the desert, like a watering hole.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out good. And I saw, because we were so outnumbered, I saw they were coming around, and I said, we're going to get enveloped from the right. And I'm calling my guys. People, it just isn't happening fast enough for me. So yes, I literally said, I'm going to walk down the middle of the street and I'm going to shoot these guys in their face. And I'm going to end this shit before some of my guys get hurt. And I walked out in the street and I just started stacking bodies, and they shot an RPG, and then they shot a second one. They both blew up behind me. So when they blew up behind me, the shrapnel took me forward. The second one, went through the bottom of my foot. First one went through my back and my lower back, my upper back. The second one was in the bottom of my foot. So I ended up behind a stone wall. Even at that point, I pulled my leash in and my rifle was twisted and there was a piece of metal sticking out of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now I got my handgun going and I see the blood coming out, and I just start packing it. Even still at that point, and I know there's a certain amount of adrenaline, but I was still so mad that it was almost an inconvenience. It was so narcissistic that, I absolutely was there.
Well, so that's your piece of that, but you're a human being who, like Wyatt Earp in Tombstone, right? So he had a moment in time where he could do that thing because he was happy. I'm talking about some guy that has no feeling inside, a guy that just likes killing, basically, and has. I mean, did you run across that type of operator?
Yeah. We used to say they imploded, not exploded. They imploded.
Mm-hmm.
You would see all of a sudden they're just as physically fit. They can move just as well. They take orders just as well, but they have a blank stare. They're never laughing. They're always to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of it being like, did you even check what's going to, they didn't even give it a second. And they swept through all of them. And because sometimes you're up against guys that have no skills.
Mm-hmm.
They're wearing a uniform, they're carrying an assault rifle, but they have no skills.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through them like nothing. And he not only goes through them like nothing, he's singing songs and
Totally disassociated.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's but how did you deal with a guy that may be on your team that's that way? Or,
Well, I'm there for him more than he wants to believe, and he's doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
So he's keeping me alive and I'm keeping him alive. And while you don't allow, now there's a total difference between doing your job really good and acting, or even it really doesn't phase you, then the guy that does his job and it starts taking war trophies, like cutting ears off and stuff, that guy you get rid of. That guy, he's actually a detriment. Okay. He's, failed part of the crew. But as long as they're doing their jobs, I really wish I think because mission is one. And as long as he's doing the mission, process is we're going to get him back to the rear and I'm going to take care of him. And we're going to get him back to the way he is.
But is that just lip service? Or, I mean, is there a way back for a guy that's gotten that far mentally or spiritually, let's call it?
Mostly not. They're the guys that they come back, part of the 22 soldiers a day, suicide.
Mission 22, yeah.
Or
past Grandmaster's Charity.
Yes, or they're, unfortunately, one of the things, because right now veterans are big business. Banks are getting in on it. Everybody's getting in on it. Everybody wants to, try and cash out on veterans. Even our own government does it. Everybody does it. They cash out on us. But the one thing they don't talk about, the high rates of people going to prison. You wouldn't believe how many men from the military use their skills now, unfortunately, in an unethical way, and now they're in prison.
Yeah, that just reminded me of, I had a friend, and I won't name him on the show, but he served in the Marine Corps. I think he did 5 or 6 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I remember after the first tour, he came back and he was like in that state of mind. Like he was just blank stare. Like you couldn't even talk to him.
1,000-mile stare.
And he went back and he was basically like the 50 cal gunner on like the back of the Humvees or whatever else. And I heard from some other people that were deployed with him, they're just like, he would just stand there, just like, doesn't matter what the hell's going on. I was just like, I don't care. Like if I die, I die.
Well, that's also a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Some guys, a hero is a sandwich. So I discard all of that. Valor is just part of your job.
Sure.
There's some guys, they would turn around and they would hope they'd grab around because they're in so much pain inside that because either they did or they didn't, or they didn't do it right, or they did do it right, or they didn't react, or they did react. There's so many multiple variables of it. After doing so many tours, you turn around, you get that 1,000-mile stare, and sometimes it would be easier to catch a round than it would be to wake up another day and deal with it.
Yeah, and he's just like, I see his Facebook posts and things, and it's like he lives in the middle of nowhere, just like alone. He broke up with his significant other. He's just, like you could just tell he's just completely isolated himself. And
that's why my wife is my wife, because my wife's been through some bad, hard times with me. She is my rock, and I love her more, than any other being. Her and my kids, they absolutely got me through some of the worst times of my life. And some people have that support staff and some, but at one time, I don't think, you just can never, at one time there was things called rules of engagement. Okay. The finger rules. Okay. Past presidents, administrations, whoever, it doesn't matter. They would say, if you think the enemy's coming out at a 3, you come out at a 3 or 4 because you don't want to be inhumane. We don't want to do things, we're not savages. Okay. They were getting rid of the warrior ethos. And, I don't know, when I got into more special operations side of the Marine Corps, I was either at 0 or 10. That's it. 0 or 10.
Sure.
Because if you turn around and you think they're at a 3 and you come out at a 4, but really they came out at a 6 because you made a mistake, you're dead. There is no restart button on the video game.
Right.
So we were either 0 or 10. So what happens is guys stay at a 10 for so long that when they come back here, that's why they have that 1,000-mile stare.
You're stripping the gears, basically. Yeah. It's funny to me that with cops, you always shoot to kill. You don't shoot to maim. It's always center mass or whatever it is because of the safety of the officer, right? So cops are taught to shoot that way. You don't shoot them in the arm. You shoot them, if the gun comes out, you shoot to kill.
Right.
Whereas in the military, where it's ostensibly much more dangerous more often, right? You got to just go one above. I mean, that doesn't.
Well, that's why. That's why rules of engagement. It's an old, outdated process.
Right.
But, we don't use it anymore. But actually, I will disagree a little bit. It's because of this officer's life when it comes to local police and money. because they're taught. Yeah, money is unfortunate, but money's big because whether you're in the right or wrong, just because of the way the lawfare and our criminal justice system works, he's robbing a bank, you shoot him, their attorney finds a flaw in something that happened while the police were breaching the bank, and now you have him suing you because, he wants to get paid because he was robbing a bank.
Yeah, it's like the people that break into your house and they get hurt and they sue you because they got injured. It's just like
It happens. It
happens constantly.
I thought that was an urban legend.
No,
I had to spend the day in Passaic County Court because I had to go for jury duty, and it was going on there. I was watching the court case. They were suing the homeowner for neglect, they were hoarders, I think. And when the guy broke in, he fell over a pile of crap and broke his ankle, which is due to a fight. And he tried to sue them, but it has to be heard. It can't be like, oh, that's ridiculous, you can't do it.
But
it still has to be heard. So it's a waste of resources on both ends.
It really is. I actually,
and I'm speaking that way as a lawyer. So I think it's actually.
I never held that against you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I remember seeing like an FBI statistic or whatever study it was, but they said that law enforcement in active, kind of shooter situations, not necessarily like active shooter at a mall or something, but just when they're using deadly force, I think they said they had something like a 14% hit rate accuracy wise. So, when you think about that, it's like, yeah, that's not very good. And
actually, I got a hold of a thing that showed all the outtakes monitors of
all the body cams and everything. Sure.
Of after shootings, during shootings. And then the reason I started watching is it showed a police officer talk to a veteran. He goes, I'm a veteran too, and he's trying to stop him from killing himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he does. He stops the veteran and starts crying, right? And then they're showing all these different videos. And to be honest with you, I think that is a great thing. I think that's a great thing that all the other officers came over and they were patting him on the back, and the human side, which I think is sometimes forgotten about.
That's maybe the main point of all this is how do you stay human in an inhuman situation, right? And how do you bring your humanity back when you got to put your soul on the shelf, right? So
I would say God and hard work. And again, motivation comes and goes, and when you're not motivated, the bad times come back. So you say, don't worry about motivation. That comes and goes. I mean, if you can have fun while you're doing it, great, but it's discipline and perseverance. And word of God.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, Dave, any last questions? Anything you want?
No, I think we could wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's been an absolute honor having you on the show.
It was fantastic.
It was a love chatting. If you ever want to come back, be very happy to have you. We talk about some other stuff. Maybe we get some other guys. We do a roundtable or something.
Absolutely.
It'd be a lot of fun. So,
and thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
You guys were worth it.
Really appreciate it. So yes, thank you for joining us. And this has been another episode of Brothers of the Arcana. And until next time, I am Alex Aldea.
I am co-host Dave Ferrigno. God bless. Thank you for listening in.
Thank you for having Mike Elston on the show this evening, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Take care.